Hey, welcome into the Big Ten Huddle. I'm your host, JR. I've got a lot to talk about going on in the Big Ten, and I'm sad tonight. Very bad news came out of Ohio State, and we have an Ohio State Indiana game to talk about that's supposed to be fun, but I'm not having any fun, Zach. I'm not having any fun.
Are you saying that we might get into a fight tonight?
No, we're not going to get into a fight. I'm just going to cry.
Oh, okay, we'll cry together.
Okay.
All by ourselves. Sorry.
uh,
And
well,
everybody just turned it off.
yeah. We'll talk about it more once he gets there. But if you don't know what I'm referring to, in Ohio State Twitter, the news has, or I guess the rumor, not news, the rumor has dropped that Ohio State's starting center, their best offensive lineman, the leader of the offensive line, has apparently torn his Achilles and will be out the rest of the season. So we will see how much is true, how much is fake. I'm sure in the coming days. Actually, Ryan Day has a press conference tomorrow. But other than that, Zach, how you doing?
I am good, but also sad. So,
Also
as
sad.
a Buckeye fan, but the show must go on.
The show must go on, and we will be our best at bringing it on because we have loyal listeners that we are going to be here for, including Road Dust. He says, I do believe wholeheartedly that the college football playoff would be better off just doing a full 30-minute arguing why IU shouldn't be in the playoffs. Like, come on. Yeah, I at this point I don't even watch the show just because it's so just like annoying and bad. Like I don't know. I'm not trying to be rude, but like some of the analysis, like John, I didn't even see what you tagged us in until you tagged us, and I was like, oh my gosh, like it just proves my point that like I don't know. If you don't know what we're talking about, it's the idea that Joey Galloway thinks that Curtis Rourke shouldn't play against Ohio State. I guess they don't want to get him hurt or something like that. John, if you know exactly what he was saying and you want to expand on why he thought that was, feel free. But I mean, Zach, do you have any thoughts on that?
I think, I don't know about Joey Galloway. I was just thinking Curt Cignetti should get up during the next Indiana basketball game and say, you know what? Purdue sucks, and so does the college football playoff committee
He should.
and the ESPN college football show.
Yeah.
Because at this point, he'd be right.
Well, that's the question, right? Who sucks more? The show that delivers the news or the news itself of the college football playoff committee?
Well, I whenever you raise Alabama's ranking for a drubbing of Mercer, there should be there should be a lot of question marks. Like I could make the argument that Georgia, with their quality of schedule, and this is Kirby, our hatred of Kirby Smart notwithstanding,
Right.
Georgia has a really good argument to have like gone up a few spots this week. Double digit
For
win
sure.
against
They went up what, two
Tennessee.
spots? I
They
think they
went up
only went
two
up two.
spots. Alabama went up three. It's like, what are we doing? Like,
Like,
what did
how are you
Bama do
not in
this
front of
week?
Miami? How is Georgia not in front of Miami? Like, I am very much so against SEC bias. Don't get me wrong. I am all about that. But like, Tennessee was literally ranked in front of Miami. Miami lost to who'd they even lose to? Georgia Tech. Like, and they dropped what? Like, I don't know. When Georgia lost to Ole Miss, they dropped like 10 spots.
Yeah.
So
And we have no love lost for Georgia.
right. Like I'm not trying to defend them. I'm just saying this committee's stupid. Like they
Yeah.
don't know what they're doing.
Yeah. It's I don't understand. I also have and you've made this point before. I can understand Texas and Penn State a little bit, but I'm like at the end of the day, I'm like, what exactly has Texas done?
Nothing. Lose to Georgia.
Yeah, like why are they three?
Texas got the benefit of beating the teams who are really bad. I guess they shouldn't say really bad. The teams that don't deserve to be ranked early when they were still ranked. And so Texas right now is the poster child of like, we are lucky there's preseason rankings because they beat Michigan and they beat Oklahoma. Oklahoma was ranked 15th at the time.
Yeah,
Everybody knew Oklahoma did not deserve to be ranked 15th, but because their preseason rating was so high and they kept barely beating bad teams, they were like, well, we can't drop them too much. And then finally they lose to Texas and they start conference play and it's like, wow, this team's really bad. And then the same thing with Michigan, where Michigan beat Fresno State. And again, I'm not saying Michigan's really bad, but they are not what anybody thought they would be this season. I mean, you and I included thought they would get 10 wins, and they are not even close to that.
Yeah. I have one other like issue with these rankings, and it's that BYU beat SMU earlier in the season.
Yeah.
And I get like teams change, but if you have the same record, I was really upset. Bud Elliott made the point, and I like Bud. Bud's great, but he made the point that Texas A&M should get in over Notre Dame at 10-3.
Yeah, he got roasted for it too.
And I'm like, dude, not only does Notre Dame have a better record, they actually beat them. Like at some point, like if we're gonna have a playoff that's about the regular season mattering, then head to head has to matter at least up to a point.
Well, that's the thing. I keep seeing people say like, well, this team would be this team. Like, we know that. And they say like, oh, well, on SP Plus, Georgia's favored over Indiana. And it's like, okay, I get that. Like, don't get me wrong. I'm not trying to say Vegas wouldn't favor this team over this team. And at the end of the day, who cares? Like, Georgia got beat by Ole Miss, Georgia was favored over them, and Georgia got beat by Alabama. I believe Georgia was favored over them as well. Maybe I'm wrong. Correct me if I'm wrong. But like, if we're just gonna do everything off that, like, there is literally no reason to play any of the games because like power ratings do not hardly change. Example A, Indiana, who is 10-0 right now. They are still 10-point underdogs to start. I think in some places right now you can find them as 13-point underdogs. It's ridiculous that they are still that big of underdogs according to the betting lines, which are not just determined by how much they think a team would win or lose by. A lot of people have this misconception of like, oh, well, Vegas thinks it's going to be this much. It's not that. Like they set these lines so that way people will bet on them and they will make money off of people's bets. I know, novel concept, but like that's why they're setting the lines. They're not setting the lines on like, oh, this team will win by this much. They're setting them because they say, we think there are a bunch of Ohio State fans that think they'll beat Indiana by 2 scores, so we're going to set it at 13. So
yeah. I'm just going to put this out there. John said Indiana would struggle playing in an SEC environment, and I got 3 words: Big Ten East. I think, especially with the injury rumors, like Indiana might win the Big Ten East this year if it was constructed. Like I would favor Indiana over Penn State.
I mean, this would literally be the game for the Big Ten East, the one we have this week.
Yeah. So like
we're gonna find out who would win the Big Ten East this weekend.
Yeah, the arguments with Indiana, I do think Indiana has to put in a good showing to make the playoff. And
I don't think so.
You don't think so?
No, they get killed by 50, and I think they should still make it because Texas lost to Georgia by 15, and they're still number 3.
Yeah,
and their schedule stinks. Texas's best win is literally worse than Indiana's best win. Texas's best win is literally Michigan. Indiana's best win is literally Washington, which is a better team than Michigan. They beat them, right? Like,
yeah.
I know it was at home. And also, Zach, let's also bring this up, okay? Everybody wants to talk about, oh, Indiana only has 1 win against teams with a 500 or better record this season. Okay, you want to talk about how many SEC teams have a win against teams with a 500 or better record, or a better than 500 record this season? Same thing with Indiana. They only have 1. How many SEC wins do you think there are in the out-of-conference against teams with a better than 500 record?
I'm going to say 0.
1. The same as Indiana. The entire conference. Oh, wow. All 16 teams. Indiana is like all 6. It's completely ridiculous that you're going to go out there and say, oh, Indiana only has 1 win versus a team with a 500 or with a record better than 500. And then the whole conference only has 1. And you want to
Yeah.
name this conference the best thing ever. I know I'm not yelling at the committee about that. I have other things to yell at the committee about, but I'm just saying the public perception of it all.
Yeah. No, no, that's fair. And I do think so this is my and I think we might differ a little bit on these guys. I love Josh Pate. I love CFB nerds. But what I can't stand is I feel like they have such a great opportunity to push back against some of the hyperbole that's given with the SEC, and often they don't. And they often sound the same as ESPN. They're not. They don't. And actually, I'll give Josh Pate credit. He said if Texas loses again, he doesn't think they should be in the playoff, which I was like, good job, Pate. Way to go. Now let's talk about the rest of the teams that don't deserve to be in because of their bad losses.
Well, Pate is getting the SEC bias badge right now from a lot of people. And don't get me wrong, I'm not saying that he doesn't completely deserve it. He does in some ways, but he really gets more of the Georgia apologist badge from what I'm seeing and hearing rather than the SEC bias. It's been hard to differentiate, but he really is arguing more for Georgia as a whole rather than the SEC. Because like you said, he agrees if Texas loses, they should be out. No SEC bias person would say that.
Yeah.
But I agree with Billy. I do think Pate ultimately, favors the SEC. I know you probably think different, Zach, but that's
no. I think he does, and I think the CFB nerds do too. I think there's a major difference though between Pate's bias and I think Pate's bias is similar to our Big Ten bias, if I'm honest. Because we have a slight we are going to see things through a Big Ten lens,
right?
And I think Pate. He's far more reasonable than Feinbaum, than most of everybody else at the 4-letter network. And everybody has a bias, right? So I think he does a better job than most at checking at the door, but he's still biased, and that's fair.
David Greenshield asked if the Big Ten Huddle, can I call in? I don't think we'll have time for it today, David. If I have time tomorrow night or Thursday night, we might do a call-in show just because I know there's so many people with thoughts on this Indiana-Ohio State game. So make sure you have notifications on. I don't know if Zack can do it, but even if Zack can't do it, I might go live by myself and do a call-in show just kind of impromptu. So I'm not confirming for sure or not, but
I'd be free tomorrow. Okay. Not Thursday, but I'd be free tomorrow.
Okay. All right. Let me check a few things. My wife has been falling asleep at 8:30 every night. So if she does that again, then I definitely can. But if she wants to stay up and hang out or something, then obviously I should spend time with my wife. So I'm not a single man that can just do whatever I want.
Absolutely. Well done. Well done.
There are so many comments, guys. I'm sorry. I can't keep track of all of them. The only other thing I'll bring up, because I did see this from D-Rock Irish, she said, heard that in the last 30-minute rumor circulating Ohio State center ruptured his Achilles tendon in the practice today. Can't confirm. So yeah, we mentioned that at the beginning. I don't know for sure. I've been on the message board to see if they have any thoughts on that or anything. They keep saying that nobody is talking, which leads me to believe that's bad news, because normally they don't talk very much about injuries. If it's bad news, normally if it's just a bad rumor, then they come out pretty quick and say, oh, it's nothing. But it doesn't seem to be what they are doing. So yeah. Any thoughts on that before we move on, Zach?
I mean, it sucks. And I think the one silver lining, if you're a Buckeye fan, not that there's much, because McLaughlin was probably going to be a finalist for the Remington. He's definitely the best lineman that Ohio State's had. Now they're down their two best linemen, with Simmons being out and McLaughlin being out, if the rumors are true. But they do have more interior line depth than they do tackle depth. So that is the one faint silver lining.
Yeah. So on three's message board just confirmed that the starting center for Ohio State did in fact get injured, but they don't know how bad it is. So apparently there was somebody at practice that he knows that something happened to Hinsman, or not Hinsman, McLaughlin, and he was helped off the field. So it looks like for sure he was injured, but yeah, they don't know if it's confirmed like torn Achilles or whatever.
Yeah,
So
I think they're doing an MRI.
Yeah.
Either today or tomorrow. So
yeah. So and honestly, you're probably not gonna even like onlookers at practice, and the staff isn't gonna talk. So probably won't know anything for sure on that until tomorrow night. Ryan Day does have a short little impromptu press conference, and I would imagine that question will most likely be asked. What do you think, Zach?
It'll be asked, and Ryan Day will say, "Oh, well, we're not going to talk about injuries," which means he's out for the season. Like,
right,
right. Just Ryan Day, come on, buddy. Like, if everybody knows, just confirm it and move on. I get wanting to protect player anonymity and whatnot, but just
Right.
I hate how they do injuries. It's so dumb.
It is, but you know what, Zach? The podcast must go on. We have to talk about Purdue and Michigan State this weekend.
Do we actually have to talk about Purdue?
I scheduled 3 minutes for it on the sheet. I don't even know if we need to go full 3 minutes. What are your thoughts, Zach?
I think Purdue is going to be looking for the actual end zone lines this time, which is an improvement.
Well, it's at Michigan State, so they won't have the black on black issue.
Right, but they're still going to have to look for it.
Yeah, that's true.
And I think they'll do that this time, which is improvement. I've got Michigan State winning by a touchdown. I do think Michigan State could put themselves in trouble the way that they turn the ball over. I just don't know where Purdue kind of hinders them. And I think there's more good from Aiden Childs than bad in this game. So I've 28-20.
Yeah, I don't think this is a game where Aiden Childs does really bad. I think that at worst, Michigan State wins by a field goal. From every indication that we're getting from like insiders with Purdue and stuff like that, sounds like they were waiting until the second last game of the season, possibly right before the Indiana game, possibly after the Indiana game, but most likely after the game before Indiana, that they'll fire Ryan Walters if they do in fact lose, which seems like a gamble for me because Purdue has actually almost won a few games, and I don't think you can fire him after he wins. So.
Yeah, it'd be an odd move.
How would you feel if you're a Purdue fan and Purdue won the next 2 games and they had to keep Ryan Walters? You can't fire him after that, right? Like you beat a ranked rival who's having their best season ever. You can't fire him after that.
I think all the Indiana fans right now are like, are you saying that Purdue could beat Indiana?
I'm not saying it could happen. I'm giving you a hypothetical.
It's not going to happen, so it doesn't matter.
That's true. Go ahead.
I was just going to say, I think outside of them upsetting Indiana, like I think you can beat Michigan State and still fire them. Because this season's been abysmal, and beating Michigan State, no offense, Michigan State's a 4-6 team. They're also rebuilding. It's not that big of an accomplishment. No offense to Sparty fans, but it wouldn't be. It's not a win against a winning team. It'd be their only other win, and they've been an embarrassment.
Yeah. Yeah, my final score prediction in this one is 30-21. I think Michigan State is not afraid to kick the field goal just to put points up on the board, and I think they win by 2 scores. So, all right, Zach, let's move on. Oh, where'd my thing go? There it is. Illinois, Rutgers. What's your thoughts on this one, Zach?
So, I don't know what to actually think about this game. Because if you asked me 2 or 3 weeks ago, I'm like, well, Illinois is clearly better. Rutgers is on the downswing, but Rutgers has looked really good. I mean, they beat Minnesota without Monangai, which just blows my mind. And Manis has looked really, really good. Those receivers have really improved. Demir Miller, Ian Strong, Dremel, like they've really stepped up in a big way. And like they against Minnesota, who has a good secondary, right? They beat.
Illinois. Oh,
Well, no,
you're
I'm
talking
saying
about
they
the
beat
previous game.
Minnesota
Sorry.
a couple weeks ago,
Okay. Yeah.
who
Sorry.
has a good secondary. They beat Maryland last week. I know Maryland's not great, but like they did it by throwing the football. And like I just was really impressed by Manis's development. So there's a bit here where I'm like, oh man, like are they gonna upset now a number 25 ranked Illinois team at home? They have Manon guy back, but I saw what Illinois did last week to Michigan State. They look like they've taken their game to another level. Pat Bryant, Sakari Franklin. I think Brett Bielema has these boys humming. I think this is less Rutgers being bad. And I think more I think Illinois actually has too much firepower. And I think Rutgers is going to have to settle for field goals because I think that defense on the back end, I think it's the best secondary that Rutgers will have faced. And while I think those receivers have really improved, I think Illinois is going to be too much for them. I've got 24-16 Illinois.
That's really close to mine. I have Illinois winning this one 24-20. I just think that Pat Bryant and some of those guys they're going to be too much. I think that Luke Altmaier is returning a little bit more to what we saw at the beginning of the season, which is exceptional for them. I mean, not that he was ever really bad. He just wasn't the same Luke Altmaier that we saw at the beginning of the season. I think there was that 4-game stretch there where he only had one game with multiple touchdown passes, and that was against Purdue, which newsflash, everybody does that against Purdue. And then that one, Purdue almost came back and won, so that was kind of crazy how that happened. But there's different context to that game. But anyway, so overall, like I think Illinois is the better team here, and Illinois should win. But like even with this being a Rutgers team that doesn't have so much they're playing for, I still think the fans are going to show up, and I still think the fans are going to be rooting hard for this team. Trying to beat a ranked team and trying to get that kind of on their resume, or I guess whatever you call it. But so I still think Illinois wins though, but I think it'll be a good game, and I think that Illinois, they're gonna have their hands full trying to stop Manon guy. So
Yep,
we'll see. 24-20. I got 24-20. John is asking about Seth's injury. We talked about it at the beginning, and then we just talked about it like, I don't know, maybe 8-10 minutes ago. So just back up and go there. Sorry, John. We're trying to talk about all the games. So if I talk about it again, I'm just gonna go off for another 10 minutes about it again. So I gotta move on, John. Sorry. Iowa at Maryland. It sounds like Maryland, correct me if I'm wrong, Zach, but it sounds like Maryland is going to stick with Billy Edwards in this one. Mike Locksley was talking about it, and he sounded like he knows the offense isn't good, but they're still going to stick with Billy Edwards in this one. So I'm not really sure what the thought process is there, but Iowa has quarterback issues of their own as Brendan Sullivan is out for the season. And it looks like Cade McNamara is probably going to make the start if he is healthy. I didn't see anything confirmed on that or not. And then if he can't start, it's going to be Jackson Strayton, however you pronounce his last name. So we'll see there. Something so Zach, what's your thoughts on Iowa at Maryland?
There is a part of me that's like, Maryland might win this game. But then I'm like, no.
Caleb Johnson still exists.
Yeah. That was kind of, but like Iowa has been such a weird team for me this year because there have been weeks where I'm like, this is a team that could have competed for a Big Ten title. And then it's like their defense just goes away and they forget how to play football. They forget how to tackle. I think the game against Michigan State was like that. Was it the game against who did they lose to recently? I'm trying to remember who they lost to that I was just shocked by. Was it UCLA? They lost to UCLA, and you're like, how did you lose to UCLA? Right. And part of it is I think UCLA has gotten a lot better. But I just think Maryland's too weak on the lines. And
Yeah.
I think Caleb Johnson's going to run wild. John asked if Caleb Johnson can have a career day. I think he gets that. I think he runs for at least 175 yards.
What was his best game of the season so far?
Was it against Minnesota?
Was
I
it?
want to. I'm looking it up right now.
That was the best second half of the season. I'm sure.
It's really good.
Yeah. No, but I agree. I think that Caleb Johnson's gonna have a really good game here. Yeah, it was against Minnesota, 200 plus yards, 3 touchdowns in that one. So yeah, that would have to be against Minnesota. Yeah, I think Caleb Johnson's gonna have a really good day here. I actually am not too concerned about the lack of quarterback play. Like, to me, I honestly have very little differing opinion on Jackson Stratton, Cade McNamara. So at this point, I really don't think it matters which one of them plays. Obviously, I do think that Brendan Sullivan not playing is a blow because I think that he is better. He is a better option than both of those two, just from a playmaking aspect and what he can do. And I think it just helps him to play more in this system, especially for next year. So the injury is unfortunate, but I mean, Caleb Johnson is quietly having just as good of a season, it seems like, as Ashton Genty. So as far as I'm concerned, I haven't seen anything from Maryland this week to make me believe, or this year, to make me believe that they're not going to, or that they're going to stop Caleb Johnson this week. Maryland every now and then can, come up and play against a good opponent, but I don't see that from this Maryland team. Mike Locksley's on his way out. I'm pretty sure he's going to get fired. If he doesn't, it's coming next year. I just don't think he's made for this new Big Ten. So, Billy, that's a good prediction there. Caleb Johnson runs for 175. Iowa's offense 190. Honestly, I would not be surprised, and I think Iowa fans would be fine with it too, because I think you get the win with that.
Yeah.
So
I forget if I shared my score. I got 27-10.
I have 27-17 Iowa.
Okay.
I think Ty Felton's just so good. He's going to make plays.
I think he might make plays, and then Billy Edwards might throw a pick six.
Wow.
Like, as they're going into the end zone. So it's like, we're going to score. And you didn't score. Just the other way.
Matt says, you keep talking about the rest of the Big Ten slate, JR. I'm keep texting about the only game that matters, LOL. I hear you, Matt. But we do value talking about every Big Ten team. So even if it's only for like 2 minutes, we are going to try and talk about every Big Ten team. So
he's talking about Michigan Northwestern, right? That's the big game of the year, or the
bowl eligibility on the line, man.
Hey, yeah, it's true.
All right, everybody, we're going to hit a break really fast, and then we'll come back and we'll talk about USC, UCLA. Stay with us. Have you ever wanted to watch all 22 film, that film the coaches watch? Well, now you can. Introducing the Coaches Film Room. Over at Minutes to Sports, former college coach Zack Smith breaks down film of the most relevant teams in college football with a bit of a Big Ten lead. It's not free, so you'll need to sign up for the Colonel tier, which is $25 a month, but I can attest to you that it is far more worth it than that. With about 4 to 8 games per week, this is worth so much more money, not to mention Zach's analysis, making you a smarter football fan. Go check it out. The links are in the description, minutestosports.com. You won't be sorry. Back here on the Big Ten Huddle, please do like and subscribe. We definitely appreciate it. If you haven't liked the video yet, go ahead and do that now. I will wait 5 seconds. All right. I hope you liked the video. Great job. All right. Let's talk USC, UCLA, Zach. USC, they had the win over Nebraska last week. You could talk about the officials if you wanted to a little bit, or you could not talk about them. We didn't really talk about them too much, but they were definitely a talking point there. UCLA has looked better, but last week they who did they lose to last week? I'm blanking now. Blanking who they lost to. Washington, that's right, because they were at Washington. Washington never loses at home. So they lost to Washington last week. That was the Friday night game. Do you think the magic for UCLA continues even after the loss? They can win 4 of their last 5, or do you think that USC is going to come out on top of this one, Zach?
So what's the spread on this? I'm trying to remember.
USC is favored by 5.
Yes. So I feel like this week might
4.5. Sorry.
I feel like this week might be chaotic. I have UCLA pulling the upset. I think hidden behind Maava's debut, which he had some great moments in that. There were also a lot of turnover worthy plays that if Nebraska was just an inch like somewhere else, that game is a Nebraska win. And that just seems to be what Nebraska does, unfortunately. But I think UCLA, despite their loss last week, like I think they have a lot of confidence. I think Ethan Garbers is playing good ball.
Mm-hmm.
And while like I think USC, if they commit to Woody Marks, I think they could win. Like I think they easily could win this game. I just still don't trust Lincoln Riley's game management. And I think if it's a close game, I think UCLA could get a game-winning field goal. And that's my prediction. Is I've got UCLA 30-28. I think UCLA gets some field goals to keep them within striking distance. USC makes a couple of blunders late, and I think UCLA at home in the Rose Bowl kicks a game-winning field goal.
Wow. I went back and forth on this one a little bit. I was actually hoping that you would pick UCLA and I could pick USC and we could see what happens in this one. So honestly, I could have gone either way, but I'm going to go with USC 24-20 in this one. I do think Maava is going to be a difference maker with his legs and what he's been able to do. At least last week, I get what people were saying about the turnover worthy throws and stuff like that, but I have to believe Maava just gets better and better each week. And I think that this is a UCLA pass defense that, although like it's not looked, it's looked better. I mean, you still had Rutgers put 32 points up on them, a struggling Nebraska offense put up 20 on them, and an Iowa offense that you got turnover over turnover over turnover on. They still put up 17 on you. So I have a feeling that USC is going to score at least 20 in this one. I don't know if UCLA gets over 20. They scored the 35. They scored the 37 on the road at Nebraska and on the road at Rutgers. But they really, 20 against Iowa, 19 against Washington, 17 against Minnesota. Like, I don't know. Ethan Garbers is playing much better ball, but if TJ Harding can't run the ball, this offense isn't going to be able to move the ball. So, and I think Woody Marks, they're going to lean on him more because he's been running the ball better as well. So I am going to go with, I'm going to go with USC in this one, 24-20.
That's fair.
All right. We'll see which one of us is right.
Yeah.
Let's talk Wisconsin, Nebraska, the battle of new offensive coordinators, the battle of bowl eligibility in this one, Zach. We don't know what Wisconsin's going to do with their play calling. The rumor is that Nate Little is going to be the offensive play caller with some of Kenny Guyton mixed in as well. Kenny Guyton had experience calling plays last year at Arkansas, but we don't know for sure. Luke Fickell did not like that question in his press conference, to say the least, which, by the way, if you want to know more about this whole thing that's going on, me and Rajiv from the Bucky Report did a video on it. You guys can go back and watch that. People seem to be receiving it well, and Rajiv is always awesome, so go check that out. Yeah. And then Nebraska, on the other side, Nebraska fans aren't really too happy with Dana Holgorsen and his play calling, and they didn't feel like the offense was any different, which I told Nebraska, I told them, you're not going to see a big difference in the offense. You can't change the offense that much, that quickly. Dana Holgorsen can do some different things with like tempo and stuff like that, but you're not going to see a huge difference just based off, even with a bye week. So, Zach, I feel pretty good about Wisconsin in this one just because of the defense. I feel really good about Nebraska's defense too, but I think Wisconsin's defense is just kind of on another level right now. People are kind of worried about Tony White and what's going on there. I think that Wisconsin's secondary is going to give Dylan Raiola fits. I really could see Dylan Raiola having like 2 or 3 interceptions in this game. I think that Wisconsin's secondary is that good. Their defensive line has been getting better and better throughout the weeks. They did pretty well against Oregon this last week, but I do think it's a lower scoring game, and honestly, I could see either team winning this one, but I'm going to go with Wisconsin 16-13.
So we have the same score for Wisconsin.
Okay.
I have 16. You have 16. I have Nebraska with 17.
So you think they're going to finally win a one-score game?
Yes. So there's a couple things. Part of this, I will be honest, I just want Nebraska to break the curse. And so maybe this is some hopium. I don't know. Um, I do think that you have another week for Holgerson to get more acquainted with their offensive system, to get more rhythm in that. Whereas Wisconsin, you're throwing them into the fire. It's at Nebraska. I think that matters, especially with Wisconsin coming off like a battle with Oregon, and I wonder how much they will be able to get up for this game, having gotten up. And you talk about Raiola. I think Raiola. I think you make a really good point about the secondary for Wisconsin really elevating and having to face Raiola, who's a freshman, and I think that could be a difference maker. On the other side, though, Nebraska's defensive line is, I mean, it's dynamic, and
Mhm.
I don't care about Braden Locke. Like,
If
there's
Braden Locke starts.
is there a word that he's not starting?
Rajiv said the entire fan base wants Mabry right now, the backup quarterback, the true freshman, to start. And Luke Fickle did not say no in his press conference,
Okay.
but he
So
also
if
didn't say yes. So
yeah, Mabry would be bold, and I would support that. And I also think that also may not bode well for Wisconsin.
I think you do it. Look at
Yeah.
Demond Williams last week for Washington, right?
Yeah. Well, and
Like,
I would do it too. Sorry, go. I cut you off.
no. I was just gonna say, like, you look at what happened with Washington last week. They trusted their guy, Will Rogers. Like, he embraced him. He had a hard day, two hard games in a row. He got benched both times, and he embraced him. And I think the team culture and everything went better for her. I respect Will Rogers 10 times more. Not that I didn't respect him before, but I have massive respect for him that he was cheering him on and everything as much as he was. So at this point, I say put Mabry in there. He couldn't be any worse than Locke is, and honestly, he has mobility that you should be able to at least get some scramble drill out of him to have him run around.
Yeah. Well, and he's the future.
Right.
He's the future. So I think either way, but I think either way, I think both quarterback situations are not great.
Yeah.
And I just I want to believe in Wisconsin, and I also want to believe in Nebraska. I just think Nebraska at home. I do think there could be some matchup. I think their receivers could do some damage as well. I know the secondary for Wisconsin's good, but I think Banks and uh, is it Nair?
Nayor.
Nair.
Nayor.
I think they could possibly get a couple of big plays on them, but
Yeah.
I think it's either way.
And I also thought that other weeks and they didn't. So like
Yeah.
I think Nebraska's wide receivers are better too, but they're just not getting the big plays. So
Yeah.
All right. Did you give your prediction?
17-16.
17-16. All right. So you're pretty bold choosing Nebraska there.
Yeah.
Zach, I know this is the game of the week that everybody just wants to know so much about.
Let's do
Northwestern
it.
Michigan. So my guy Fisherman put it in the chat. I don't think he's here tonight, but he put in the chat a couple episodes ago that if you look at the stats, Northwestern and Michigan are actually really similar. I don't have them in front of me because I was going to put them on the sheet, and then the Seth McLaughlin news hit, and then I was like, I have to figure out about this, and so I forgot to put them next to each other on the sheet. But I can tell you, if you go look them up, like Northwestern and Michigan have very similar stats on defense, very similar stats on offense. Like, I think this is a game where either team could win this game, and if you're a Michigan fan, you're sick at that fact right now because this is a team that, has NFL talent on it, and they're just not able to get it done. I do feel better about Michigan after the Indiana game. I felt like that defensive line really got after the quarterback. I felt like the linebackers were playing better in that one. Zeke Berry at corner was a really nice revelation. I do think Northwestern has good wide receivers, so if Will Johnson doesn't play, I do think that they could do really well in this one, but ultimately, I think they're just going to get too much pressure on Jack Lausch, and he's going to have a really bad day. I don't know about a really bad day, but it's going to be a long day for him back there. So I'm actually going to predict Michigan to win this one, 20-17. Also, home field advantage helps. What do you think, Zach?
Yeah, I think if this were at Wrigley or actually more, if it was at the Lake, I actually would pick Northwestern to win. But I just think the fact that it's at Michigan has more talent. I think that defensive line thought it, if they can get off the field and they don't have to be on the field all the time, like they're a load. And I just don't think. I think Northwestern has a good defensive front. I think their offensive front's okay. Their
Yeah.
line is okay. I think it's gonna be tough sledding for Northwestern to get the ball to their playmakers. I think similar in a lot of ways to the Ohio State game, where like they had a few splash plays. I thought Kurtz played well. I thought Henning played well, but they never really got going.
Yeah.
And I think that's what's going to happen. And I think Michigan has enough, you know, Davis Warren has looked better like over the past few weeks. They're on a bye. They were off a bye. So I like Michigan. I like them 24-13.
All right. It's interesting. Doug, you might be coming in late. He says news regarding Seth is not rumors. On3, their message board said that they do think there's an injury from what they're hearing, but it's undisclosed how bad it is. So take that for what it's worth. But that seems to be the general consensus right now. Is there is an injury. They're not sure how bad it is. Apparently, somebody who was at practice and saw it happen talked about it, but they don't know for sure. So, all right. Zach, our last game, and then we'll hit another commercial, and then we'll get to Indiana, Ohio State. We're running behind a little bit, so let's do this one kind of quick too. I do think that it deserves a good amount of talking because Penn State plays at Minnesota, and Minnesota is more of a difficult team than I think people are giving credit for, especially nationally. I think some of the Penn State fans feel confident about this one, but I don't know if you would feel too confident. It's nothing I have against Penn State. I really think this Minnesota team is good. Although their secondary didn't look as good against Rutgers, I do think they're going to give Drew Aller a hard time in this one. This could be another one where the lack of wide receiver play is evident for Penn State. Drew Aller could be primarily locking in on Tyler Warren. I think he's the key, though. I think Minnesota has a good enough defense to stop Penn State in the running game, stop Penn State's passing game. But if they cannot stop Tyler Warren, then that's going to be the key. I could see Penn State running away with this one, but I could also see Minnesota winning this game. What are your thoughts, Zach?
Yeah, I think it's close. And I think part of the problem for Penn State is they're facing a better than expected secondary. Guys like Parrish, Wally, and they're going up against them with a receiving core that has improved from a year ago, but that doesn't say much, right? We talked about it when they played Ohio State. This receiving core is what's holding them back. And I think that's the biggest issue I see in this game. Minnesota's good up front. Like their defensive line is going to challenge Penn State's
They're
offensive line.
They're going to put pressure on Aller.
They're going to put pressure on him. I think they're going to slow down the run game. I think the X factor, if Kotelnicki doesn't do some things that he did against Ohio State, I think the X factor is Tyler Warren. And I think if they run him out of the Wildcat, I think if they get him his touches in the receiving game, he needs 15 touches. Like he's got to get a ton of touches in this game. Otherwise, I think Minnesota, they have a receiver that can beat him in Daniel Jackson. They have two really good running backs. The quarterback, like Brosmer is one of the more underrated quarterbacks in this league. And sorry, I just saw John Jacobs' comment, and I had a Kent State.
I think he strategically puts it in there when you're talking, just so that way he can mess you up.
Yes, yeah. Thank you, John. Listen, have you seen Penn State when they played Kent State? Come on now, they're
definitely
good.
beating Minnesota if that Penn State team comes.
Yeah.
Also, if Minnesota plays like Kent State, they're definitely beating Minnesota.
Yes. But I think at the end of the day, I do think Warren gets his touches. I've got it close, 21-20.
Yeah, so I have it close as well. I have it 28-24. I think Warren's going to get his touches. I think that Kotelnicki kind of learned from some of his mistakes against Ohio State. I think that I think he's still going to use his motion and do some of that stuff that he likes to do, but I don't think he's going to get too cute with it. I think that he's really going to lean on Tyler Warren in this one. I don't think we're going to see very much Bo Prabula. He did have a touchdown pass last week and stuff, but I I picked Penn State, but like honestly, I'm probably 60-40 on this one. Like I think Minnesota has a good chance to win this game, especially with it being at home. So, John, it would be bold to pick Minnesota. I'm not gonna do that, but I'm just telling you right now, like if we come back here on Sunday night or Saturday night, me and Kent are here, and Minnesota has won, and they're chanting PJ Fleck's name again. Like, do not be surprised at all, because this Minnesota team, I think they're still playing very hard for PJ Fleck, even though they don't have much to play for, and I think it's going to be a really good game. So,
Yep.
if Penn State loses, do they still make the playoffs, Zach?
No.
I don't think they do either.
Yeah, I don't think they have a win. Like, I think if you're putting them against other 10-2 SEC teams, they don't have a win.
Yep.
Yeah.
Their best win right now is a close loss to Ohio State.
Yeah.
Like,
I will say this though, and this is what gives me confidence. This is why because I thought about picking Minnesota too, John. The reason why I didn't is what I've seen from them the past 2 weeks. And I know one game was Purdue, but what they did to Washington I thought was pretty shocking. Because I thought Washington like had a chance to maybe go in and not win, but I thought make it close. I mean, Penn State just blew the doors off of them. And I know they're a different team on the road. They're a different team on a bye. I do think Penn State is a borderline elite level team. And I think that is something different that Minnesota has not seen this year.
right.
And so that's just I think where I'm leaning. But I think Minnesota is good enough to make it close.
Yeah. Yeah, I just think that Minnesota's too good to have a Washington thing happen. And Washington is just so bad on the road. Washington on the road is equivalent to Purdue. Like, it's just, that's where we're at right now. So, but Washington at home is like equivalent to, like, I don't know, Penn State, Illinois. Like, they're just really good at home. So it's kind of crazy how that works. All right. Quick commercial, and then we'll come back. We'll talk about Ohio State, Indiana, and stay with us after that, because we have a super secret mystery topic that we're going to be talking about. Zach doesn't even know what it is.
I don't even know.
So, yeah, super secret mystery. Stay with us. Home Field is your go-to destination for premium collegiate apparel with a passion for comfort and a flair for vintage design. Home Field brings you gear that is comfortable and stylish. With over 150 colleges to choose from, Home Field digs deep into the archives, uncovering forgotten logos, iconic mascots, and legendary moments to create one-of-a-kind apparel. Use my code TBTH for 15% off for new customers, or use my link in the description. Back here on the Big Ten Huddle, we appreciate you being with us. We do have a big game to talk about. It is Indiana, Ohio State. Zach, I have to be honest, I was not looking forward to the day of this prediction, because I knew I was most likely going to make a prediction that would make all of my Indiana friends in the chat mad, and I don't want to do that to them. So you can go first. What's your thoughts? Don't give your prediction yet, though.
Thanks. Well, I think it's hard. It's hard, especially with the Seth McLaughlin news.
Which, by the way, the poll, 60% of people said that an injury to Ohio State center does not change their prediction. So
yeah, so 60%. I still, so I'll just be out with it. I am picking Ohio State, even with the injury.
Gasp.
And I think what I saw in the Michigan game actually really concerns me for Indiana. And the reason is because I think guys with mobility have been able to hurt Ohio State a bit. Rourke, he can move a little bit, but he's not mobile. And I mean, you saw against Michigan's defensive front, they really stymied him and their offense. And Josh Jacobs makes a good point. IU is missing their right guard.
Is it
I
the right guard or the left guard? I thought it was the left guard. I might be wrong though.
It's a guard. um, and they only ran the ball, I think it's for 1.7 yards per carry, something abysmal. Now, some of that was sack yardage. But again, they didn't run the ball well against Michigan. And I'm just not sure that Indiana will be able to run I think Indiana is going to be a little bit more one-dimensional than people realize, which I think Rourke will still make plays. I think they have the receivers to really threaten Ohio State. But again, I think they have the ability to threaten them with those intermediate balls. I don't know if they have guys that are going to get deep consistently. Like beat them for one play touchdown drives. I don't think they have an Evan Stewart, right? Like I think Elijah Surratt is fantastic. Omar Cooper is great. Miles Price is great. They're really good, and I think they might make their living on back shoulder throws and intermediate routes. But this defense, Ohio State's defense has been really good in the red zone. And so I think they can.
Indiana's offense has also been really good in the red zone.
And I get that. I think Ohio State will get one stop to force a field goal. And I'll say my original prediction before I heard about McLaughlin was 38-27. I've changed it. It's 28-24. And part of the reason why I've subtracted a field goal is because I think Ohio State will I think they will want to shorten the game a little bit. And I think that'll take a possession away from each team. I still think Ohio State's going to score. I think they'll make enough stops. And I don't actually like the matchup for Indiana in this from a schematic standpoint. So I think Ohio State, the other thing I'll say about Ohio State's offensive line, they have not been great. I think losing McLaughlin hurts. I do think that if they were going to have an injury on the offensive line, another one in the interior is where you want it. Not that you ever want an injury. My guess is they shift Hinsman over, who was not great last year, but he was okay.
He can snap the ball.
He can snap the ball, and he has played fairly well at guard. So I like you shuffle him over, and then you have Saraveld and you have Shabola, who again they've not been great this year, but they all have experience. You still have Luke Montgomery, who they're confident in getting snaps. So is it national championship level breaking for Ohio State? Probably. Is it Indiana? Like, does it break them for this game? I don't think so. So I've got 28-24.
I think the McLaughlin injury is huge because I think that Indiana, which by the way, if you've listened to other people talk about this game, and I've listened to at least 4 or 5 different breakdowns. And again, I'm not going to, put their names out there because I don't want to, disparage other podcasts, but there's just a whole lot of misconceptions going on about this game right now. It's very obvious there are people who have not seriously watched Indiana play, and they're just going off like, well, Ohio State's more talented. Well, Ohio State's bigger. Well, Ohio State's stronger. And it's like, what in the world do you think that matters when you just saw Indiana go up against a bigger, stronger, more talented in certain areas Michigan team, and they were able to beat them even by having literally no offense in the second half? Because at the end of the day, that Indiana team was opportunistic and they did what they had to do to win.
Yep.
And I think that is huge for this game because I think Indiana is going to throw the kitchen sink in, and they're going to do everything they possibly can to win this game. I'm talking fake, punts. I'm talking trick plays all over the place. I'm talking all of that stuff. And at the end of the day, like, people just assume that Ohio State is going to be able to run on Indiana because Ohio State is bigger, faster, stronger. That's not the case. Like, if you've watched Indiana this season, what Indiana does with their defensive line to stop the run is super creative. I mean, other teams are doing it too, but I have seen Indiana do it better than almost everybody else. What they're doing a lot of the times is they're taking their defensive tackles and they are stunting their defensive ends into the inside, and the defensive tackles are taking out 2 blockers, and then that leaves either the defensive end or the linebacker there in the gap to be able to tackle the running back. Ohio State, especially with the injury of Seth McLaughlin, is not going to be able to see those things as well and not going to be able to call out those things as well. We all saw what happened last year when Ohio State didn't have their starting center against Missouri for whatever reason, whether it was podcasts and he got suspended or if he was hurt or he couldn't snap the ball for whatever reason. We all saw what happened then. And I just think everybody is discrediting if Seth McLaughlin is not playing what that does to this team. I think Carson Hinsman being able to, playing last year helps, but there's a reason why he looked much better at guard than he did at center last year. It's because he's a guard. That's what his position is. And Seth McLaughlin is just so much better at calling stuff out, being the leader of the team, and doing that stuff. So at the end of the day, this is November football. Whoever runs the ball best is going to win this game. We can talk about the receivers, we can talk about the quarterback and what they're able to do all day long, but this is November football. It's going to be cold. It's going to be hard to run the ball in this one with both pretty good run defenses. I mean, Ohio State is number 1 in the nation, I believe, but we've also seen Northwestern run on Ohio State at times. So I don't think they're like this impenetrable force that nobody can get around. And I think that Indiana's going to exploit things. They had a bye this last week. They got healthier. They have more time to game plan. And I think people are severely underestimating Indiana in this one. Now, I'll talk about Ohio State because I just praised Indiana for a long time. I do think Ohio State has acknowledged how big this game is. And I think the crowd is going to be a factor in this one. Ryan Day in his press conference was very adamant that the crowd needs to show up and the crowd needs to actually be on their feet and cheering the entire time in this game. So I do think that the home field advantage, do I think it's going to be as big as Oregon was against Ohio State? No. It's a noon game, and Ohio Stadium is not Autzen Stadium. It's just not. And the fans are not the fans over in Autzen Stadium. So it's just not. But regardless, I think that the fans are going to make an impact. It's going to be difficult for Indiana in a hostile environment to be able to have the right calls and some of those things. And I do think that Ohio State's defensive tackles are they are good enough and they are experienced enough that they're going to be able to help stop the run in a lot of ways. And I think that you could see that happen for like 3 or 4 drives in a row and really stall out Indiana's defense or Indiana's offense. The difference for me will be, can Ohio State get something to happen on special teams to swing it their way? Because I think Indiana's defense is going to be able to stop Ohio State's offense at times. I don't think it's going to happen the entire game. I also don't think Ohio State's defense is going to stop Indiana for the entire game. But when that time comes, when there is something happening to Ohio State's offense and they can't move the ball, what happens in special teams? Do they get a big return? Do they get a punt block? Do they get something like that to happen? I honestly think this game is going to come down to one special teams play and which team makes that play. I understand, everybody's going to say, JR, you know what you're talking about. Ohio State's faster, stronger, yada, 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 more talented, whatever. I really don't think that's the case in this one. I think Indiana is super well coached. I think that Indiana is super motivated. I think that Indiana is ready for this challenge. They know everything that is on their shoulders right now in this one. And so it's going to come down to who makes the special teams play. The team that I saw make a special teams play 2 weeks in a row was Ohio State. And so call me a homer. Maybe I am. If I am, that's fine. But I'm going to pick Ohio State to win this one 31-24. Because of a special teams play, whether that's a return, whether that's a punt block, whether that's a field goal block, whatever it is, that's my prediction. Am I crazy, Zach?
No, I appreciate you bringing up Indiana being really well coached because
it's a huge difference. It's a huge difference. People are not giving it enough credit.
Which is, I think, the frustration with some of the playoff talk. And why, I said earlier, I think if they get blown out, it could be trouble for them. I don't think it should. I think people aren't watching this team, and I don't think they get blown out. Even with my earlier, before McLaughlin was out, losing by 11 to what people might think is the best team in the country on the road is not it's nothing to sniff at. And I don't think it was going to be an easy 11. I thought it was going to be close until the end of the fourth quarter. I do think, though, probably my one maybe pushback is that I agree that I think the bye week does help Indiana. I also think the past 2 weeks for Ohio State has really helped them because I think they have been taking the past 2 weeks to prepare for the kitchen sink. Because, even like going back to the Northwestern game, some of the blitzes that Knowles was throwing out, you're like, what are you doing, man? Like this, why are you blitzing this way and this and in this scenario? It doesn't make any sense.
I have a
And
theory on that, but go ahead.
well, my theory is this. I think they're trying a whole bunch of new stuff to then throw at Indiana's offense. And I think special teams could be the thing. I think the other question is who wins the chess match between the offense having time, Indiana's offense having time to scheme up some things, and the defense scheming up things with Jim Knowles. I'll say one other thing real quick, and then I want to get your theory here. But the only game that Will Howard has thrown for over 300 yards was against Oregon.
Mm-hmm.
Probably played his best game against Oregon. And this is a dude that has played his best under the bright lights. Well, or the big stage, I should say. Like even against Penn State, terrible decision in the beginning of that game. And then he played the rest of the game with ice water in his veins. And like I didn't think he had a great game, but in big moments, he made big plays. Against Oregon, he was phenomenal. Right? Had a couple of bad plays at the end of that. Still should have had a second left to kick a game-winning field goal. But he's played very well, and I believe Curtis Rourke will play well. I think if Howard plays well, I think Indiana's receivers are really good. I think if Jeremiah Smith gets loose, I think that could spell real trouble. And I don't think it's just Smith. I think it is Ibuka. I think it is Tate. And, D'Angelo Pons, great corner. He gives up six inches to Jeremiah Smith. Like, that's a real matchup issue, despite the fact that Pons is fantastic.
Yeah, I mean, Ohio State just has to use it the right way, right? We also saw much bigger wide receivers for Nebraska go up against Pons, and they still couldn't do anything. So, like, while they should use that to their advantage, Nebraska didn't. So, and I think Ohio State does have a better coaching staff than Nebraska, but they didn't. So we'll see. No, my theory on the blitzing is that there has been nothing that teams have been able to do to get to Curtis Rourke this season other than sacking him. That was all that Michigan was able to do that was actually able to stop him, because under pressure, Curtis Rourke has been very good. Even against blitzing, Curtis Rourke has been really good. So for me in this one, I felt like Jim Knowles was like, let's just blitz as much as possible, get as many people going at the quarterback as possible, so that way against Indiana, we do the same thing, but guys actually finish. They don't just get pressure on Curtis Rourke, but they actually go in, they get to the quarterback, and they finish. Now, Ohio State didn't do a great job of that at the beginning of the game against Northwestern. Jack Lausch was pretty hard to get a hold of, but I do think that they improved on that as the game went on. And that said to me that Jim Knowles was challenging his guys. Hey, you're going to get to the quarterback in this one. We're going to make sure of it. We're going to blitz. We're going to use, all these different things.
Yep.
You just have to finish. And that's going to be the biggest thing for Ohio State in this one, trying to not just get pressure on Curtis Rourke. 'Cause I don't think pressure is enough. I think Curtis Rourke will, he will just dissect you. Even if you get pressure on him, you have to actually get in there and finish. But I am worried about that with Ohio State. So we'll see. I don't know if Indiana has a true speedster like Tez Johnson to get by a Denzel Burke or something like that. But they do have that back shoulder fade that I don't think anybody throws better than Curtis Rourke this year.
No. And if Indiana wins, and I know people in the chat, they're like, you don't believe in Indiana. I do believe in Indiana. Like I have thought a lot about picking Indiana in this game. I think Ohio State does have an edge in multiple places. But if they're going to lose, if Indiana's going to win this game, it's because those corners for Ohio State are not physical. They're not physical enough, except for Igbinosun, who's too physical. And they're not going to be able to separate the ball from the receivers on those back shoulder fades. And they're deadly. Surratt, Cooper, like they're so good at it. And That is, I think, the biggest fear if you're an Ohio State fan is, can they get enough stops on those plays?
Yeah. Yeah, we'll see. It's going to be a huge piece of the puzzle. Regardless, I'm excited for this game. If I had to put a percentage chance on it, I'm giving Ohio State like Ohio State fans will get mad at me for this, but I'm giving Ohio State like a 52-55% chance to win. I'm giving IU like a 48-45% chance to win this one, which to me is I would have given Ohio State a higher chance to beat Oregon than I am giving them to beat Indiana. I still think they should, right? I'm picking them, but
yeah.
I just think there's so much about this Indiana team that everybody's overlooking. And
Yeah.
I've not heard a single person other than like people who have actually watched Indiana this season actually give them their proper respect, because Indiana is a very real contender in this game.
Yes.
And like I've heard Ohio State fans talk about the Michigan State game from, what was that, 2022?
It's not that.
It is not that. And there are so many people comparing Curt Cignetti to Mel Tucker. Like, if you compare Curt Cignetti to Mel Tucker, I just immediately know that you have no idea what you're talking about. Like, there is nothing the same about those two, how they run their teams, their career arc, what they've done. Like, I heard somebody the other day say, yeah, well, Mel Tucker brought in all his guys just like Curt Cignetti did. And I was like, how? Like, how do you think that he brought in all his, like, he came from Colorado. They stunk.
John said it best. Mel Tucker had Kenneth Walker, and that's it.
Right. And like that is not this Indiana team. This Indiana team has a very good defense. This Indiana team has Curtis Rourke, fantastic wide receivers, one of the best offensive lines in the country. I mean, Indiana is a Joe Moore finalist for the offensive line, like, which Ohio State is too, but you know, we'll see. All right, Zach, any more thoughts on that?
I was just gonna say, in terms of win percentage, I'm about 60-40. Like, that's like, it's close for me.
Are you saying Paul Feinbaum's opinion isn't an informed one? Shocking. Yeah, I know, right? How dare somebody go against the great Paul Feinbaum?
It's like the Wizard of Oz.
All right, Zach, I don't even have a graphic for this one. Okay.
Oh no.
All right. Here's my opinion. In the modern age of college football, everybody is talking about how you shouldn't want to have to go to the conference championship game because it could hurt your thought process in the playoffs, right?
Mm-hmm.
A lot of people are talking about that. There's a lot of different opinions on it. Some I think are valid. Some I'm also like, just play the game and win and don't be scared of losing. Like, don't be a wimp. Like, don't be afraid of losing. But then I also got to thinking about bowl games. And I was listening to a podcast the other day. It was a Michigan podcast, and they kept talking about how much they need to beat Northwestern to get to a bowl, and how everything is going to be terrible for Sherrone Moore if he doesn't even get to a bowl game this year. Zach, I think bowl games are complete crap. I think they mean nothing. I think that they're a waste of time, and I think that you shouldn't care if your team goes to one. Actually, at this point, if you're a Michigan or a Wisconsin, I think you should be rooting for your team not to go to a bowl game. Because you know why? Teams that don't go to bowl games get a head start in the transfer portal. They get a head start taking their guys and moving on from them. They get a head start in figuring out who their new coaching staff is going to be. And so for me, if like I'm a Michigan fan, I don't want Michigan going to a bowl game because that roster needs work and that offensive coordinator needs fired. Like, they need to figure out what they're doing. Props to Wisconsin. They already got ahead of it. But if I'm Wisconsin, I want to finish the season as quickly as possible, get out there, hire an offensive coordinator, start talking to as many transfer portal quarterbacks as I possibly can, go out there and start talking to defensive linemen, try to start talking to running backs, wide receivers. Like, I honestly think bowl games are more of a curse nowadays for 6-6 teams than they are a help. Like, if you're a 9-3 team and you think you're going to retain your roster, yes, I think it's a good thing. You continue to practice, you help get some other guys in and help work them in your practice and stuff. But as far as it goes for like 6-6 teams, even some 7-5 teams, like, I think it's a waste of time. I think you're much better served to go out there into the transfer portal and start getting the players and start firing the coaches who no longer belong there. Do you agree with me or not, Zach?
Let them fight. No, I see what you're saying, and I actually
Oh, and
partially.
one more thing. Philip brings this up. Bowl games are all about extra practices. Yes, Philip, you are completely correct. Why are you practicing guys, though, that are going to just leave? Or you're going to replace in the transfer portal? Like, do you really want, like, you still have spring practices. I doubt that 20 practices at the end of the season really changes all that much from all the transfer portal guys you're going to get. I genuinely believe that there is so much roster turnover today in college football that you don't, the bowl practices do not serve you nearly as much as they once did before with how many guys can leave. Matt Rule said it just today or yesterday, was it? You're going to see teams signing 30, 45 guys out of the transfer portal. It's not going to be uncommon this year because there's going to be that much roster turnover. So the bowl game practice, it's not going to do a whole lot for all that roster turnover. Anyway, go ahead, Zach. Sorry.
I I I somewhat agree with you, but I think probably for a different reason. I Well, and I think you're highlighting all the issues currently plaguing college football, which I always go back to. We keep trying to change the sport one one rule at a time rather than just completely overhaul it at once to make it all align well. And so, I mean, I think the transfer portal and NIL is a really good example, right? We're like, we need to pay the players. And they're like, great, okay, done. And we're like, well, wait a minute. There's got to be rules in place. And we're like, what rules? And now all of a sudden you have what is the worst, the, the worst of what we ever wanted with NIL, which is basically how much money can I get for this star quarterback? And let's just throw it at him. Because that was the purpose of NIL, right? No. And I think it's the same thing. We want a better postseason and we want a transfer portal and we want this, but we also want to keep the tradition of bowl games. It's like, guys, if you're going to do all this other stuff, then you have to rethink the whole system. And I think bowl games, the way they are currently, I would agree with you. Like if it's in the middle of a signing period, if it's in the middle of a transfer portal period, all that stuff, then it does limit you. It does hinder you. You only have so much time to commit to recruiting and to talking to transfers. So I agree with you on that. I think where my pushback would be, how do you build a postseason that complements the rest of your sport, which I feel like is what we've been trying to answer for the past 25 years, starting with the BCS. And the reality is they keep screwing it up because just like this year, why is the 12-team playoff going to be so contentious? Because there was also all of this conference realignment, which for some reason, the Big Ten, the SEC, everybody was like, let's get rid of divisions because that's going to help. It's not. Like, I hate that we don't have divisions this year because everything's going to be muddied, especially in that stupid conference down south. And so we don't actually have like even balance, and we don't have good tiebreakers and all this other stuff. Mm-hmm. And so the postseason's just, all right, let's just throw this 9-3 SEC team in because Feinbaum said so. Whatever. So I think what you're saying is a microcosm of trying to do micro scale changes when we need to do a macro level overhaul.
Right. And like I see what some people are saying in the comments, and I think you make good points as well, Zach. Alibaba, our guy Mike, he said, you don't think bowl games matter? Really, dude? That's quite a take. Young players benefit a ton from bowl game practice. And I would say, look at Minnesota last year with their bowl game, right? Like, they literally had to pay a quarterback to stay in order to play in that bowl game. Like, all the quarterbacks left. Max Rosemer came in from the portal. He didn't get bowl practice time. He didn't get to play in the bowl. You know, like, obviously there were some players that did benefit from it. I'm not saying that, like, nobody benefited from it. But, like, what more could PJ Fleck have done if he wasn't preparing for a bowl game, what more could he have done in the transfer portal? What more could he have done in, securing new players and stuff like that? Like,
Mhm.
I get people are really on the practices, but I don't think it matters all that much to have extra practices when you're going to be bringing in all new players, and some of those players that practice with you are going to be leaving anyway,
Yep.
like, and especially, like, I think some people are saying, like, yeah, this 9-3 team does matter. Again, I'm not saying this for 9-3 teams. Teams that are 9-3 and are returning a lot of young talent that are going to be crucial in them having a better season next year. I totally get why a bowl game matters, and I'm not arguing that they shouldn't go to a bowl game. I think that the bowl game was beneficial for Ohio State in some areas last year, even though it was really hard. I think that it did help in a lot of ways too. But a team that's like 6-6, again, my example is Michigan. Michigan is going to turn over most of that roster for next year. Do you want to try to turn over most of that roster while you're trying to prepare for a meaningless bowl game? Or do you want to try to turn over most of that roster and hire a new offensive coordinator when you don't have to prepare for a bowl game, when you don't have to be game planning, when you don't have to worry about if we don't perform in this one, then we're going to get embarrassed, right? Like,
Mhm.
what is the more important thing here? And I think it's getting things right for next year. And I hate saying this because I really like bowl games and I think that they're fun. I think they're fun seeing other teams from other conferences play and stuff like that. But I just think if we just take a real hard look at it and be honest with ourselves, like, for 6-6 and some 7-5 teams, they just really don't matter all that much, and they're more of an inconvenience than they are convenient for the
Can
team.
could I push back? There's one other thing I want to push back on though,
Okay.
because I think for a team like Michigan and like Washington, totally understand. But I think teams like Minnesota who are rebuilding, or Maryland or
No,
Rutgers.
I think Minnesota would greatly benefit from a bowl game this year. I think that would help them
Yeah.
a lot.
So I think part of it depends on who you are as a program and where your program is at. So like Rutgers getting to a bowl game again this year, deeply significant because it's showing to the rest of the world that Rutgers isn't going away anytime soon, at least from like being able to consistently have winning records. That's huge for them. But I think you're right about Michigan. Like Michigan, they don't want to be in 6-6 bowl games. They want to be in the playoff picture. Like and so I think I yeah, again, my bigger issue is let's blow up the whole system and let's have a
Right.
postseason that actually complements rather than fights against everything else. But I think I agree with you. I agree with you partially because I think there are some teams where I'm like, yeah, you don't need what you need is an overhaul of an influx of talent for where you want to be.
Right. Um, Sonny says Illinois is a
Yeah,
developmental school. Having 15 extra practices is huge for us. I agree for Illinois.
yeah.
Illinois is a good team this year. Illinois has good players that they need to continue to develop and get better for next year. Michigan does not. Wisconsin does not. Like, you can't tell me that Wisconsin is going to be running with the same quarterbacks they have on the roster this year next year. Like, I I know, like, the thought of Mabry starting is like a cool story and stuff like that, but I'm sorry, Luke Fickle's coaching for his job next year. He can't afford to have a true sophomore who hasn't
Yeah.
started a game yet, possibly, or only one game that was a bowl game, uh, do better. And it's not even a guarantee you're going to get good enough to play. Like, look at Miller Moss. Moss had 6 touchdown passes last year in their bowl game. He got benched this year. Like, I don't know. Could USC gone out there and tried a little bit harder to get another quarterback? They almost had Will Howard, but, like, I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't think the solution of going to a bowl and practicing our players that are just going to leave anyway or aren't going to be starting for us next year anyway is the best solution for every team. Not
Yep.
saying every team should just skip or anything like that. I'm not even advocating that teams should skip. I think if you have a good enough record for it, uh, you should do it. But I'm just saying, like, if you're a 5-7 team and you miss a bowl, I don't think it's the end of the world. I
Hmm.
actually think you're set up better for next year,
Yeah.
in some ways. And let's not
Well,
act like these teams don't have secret practices. Like,
yeah.
there are so many secret practices and stuff that goes on. Literally, the rule is you can't use a football. Like, these guys are still throwing tennis balls. These guys are still practicing and running and weight. Like, they are still doing stuff. Maybe it's not organized by the coaches, but they're still out there doing stuff.
Yeah.
You know, like, it's not like they're just sitting in their dorm rooms not doing anything. Like,
Yeah. I think we said this in that video when Phil Longo got fired. In our video, not the one with Rajiv. I actually thought it was good that they fired him now, even if they don't make a bowl, because I think you need to get ahead of that to make the right hire at offensive coordinator. And so I think in that regard, like that's where I would align with you in that. So
yeah, I mean, it gives Luke Fickell time to actually go out and not only find the right offensive coordinator, but then that offensive coordinator can come in and he can get to working on finding a quarterback as quickly as possible. Because you're not going to be able to find your quarterback until you find your offensive coordinator, right?
Mhm.
Like, I think what Michigan doing right now is the worst thing you could be doing. And I'm not just saying that because I'm an Ohio State fan. Like, I legitimately think that Sharon Moore is making a huge mistake by focusing in on Bryce Underwood so much, by keeping Kurt Campbell as your offensive coordinator. Like, at this point, every time Michigan goes out there on offense, people are laughing at them because it's just that bad.
Yeah.
You have got to fire Kurt Campbell, and you have got to be the first one going to different coaches, like, and contacting them right now and saying, you need to be our offensive coordinator next year. We'll pay you. I mean, they're paying Wink Martindale the most of any defensive coordinator in college football. So if you can pay him that much, you should be able to lure away a good offensive coordinator. So, all right. That's all we got for you, people. Good show tonight, Zach. I hope the Indiana fans aren't too mad at us. Some of them were saying they expected it. So, but you know what? Guess what? I will be here Saturday night with Kent. USC UCLA doesn't start until 11 though, so it'll be at like 2:30 a.m.
Oh,
But I will be here with Kent. And if Ohio State loses, you can give me all the crap you want. And you know what? Even if they do lose, I'm gonna be happy for Ohio State. I got an Indiana shirt in my closet, and I promise you, if Indiana wins, I'll come on here on the podcast and I'll wear that shirt for you, Indiana fans.
I may have to buy a home field Indiana shirt if Indiana wins.
That's where I got mine from, and it's very cozy.
Oh, there you go. There you go.
I'll send you a suggestion.
Yeah.
With the link, of course, that you can find.
Of course, yeah. My wife is from Indiana, so like, actually, the thing that caught my eye about my wife, the first thing I saw was she was wearing an Indiana Hoosier shirt. So I have a lot of love for the Hoosiers.
Wow.
So,
there we go. That explains it. Both of us have wives from Indiana. That's why this has been such a pro Indiana podcast all year long. You can thank our wives, Indiana fans.
Amen. Amen.
Zach, anything going on at Big Ten football talk you want to talk about before we get out of here?
We have an episode with the Hoosier Huddle dropping Thursday about Indiana's Indiana.
Do they know that you hate Indiana?
Yes, I mean, I was very clear when I told Sammy, like, Sammy, by the way, I hate Indiana, but can you come on the show?
By the way, we hate you, but can you come, please?
Yes.
I need views.
Listen, it's amazing to me how, we got the guys from out of the blue on both of our shows, because although they're great. I need to have them on
again. I keep forgetting to contact them.
We should get them on for next week for Ohio State, Michigan.
Maybe we'll pitch them the bowl thing and see what they think.
The bowl, that would be good. I would actually be a really good conversation, I think.
Yeah.
But,
all right, everybody, be on the lookout for that. We will we'll figure some stuff out. I'm probably going to make a Seth McLaughlin video after this. I don't know if Zach has time to do it with me or not. If he does, he'll be on there too. But if not, I'm going to make one just so that way. And it won't be exactly what we said on here. I'm going to put my thoughts together a little bit more than I thought about it. So expect that if you want a little bit more detail into the Seth McLaughlin stuff. Or if you don't, that's fine too. Just don't watch. But, maybe watch and just like put it on mute, because then we still get a view for it.
There you go.
So that would help.
There you go.
Thanks, everybody. We appreciate it. Have a good one.